And to give you a bit of context before I start, I'm the head of people and culture of a 50-sized company, 50 people, okay? I started when we were 20 and now we are 50. And I think a big disclaimer before we start, I think every process in HR needs to be suitable for the specific needs of each company. And the fact that I'm doing this in my company doesn't mean that it's a good solution for companies, bigger companies, or even my sized companies. So this is what, considering the problems we have, the vision we have, the culture we have in our company, that's what we think at the moment makes sense. Okay. And I want to say this because sometimes it's really common that people in HR feel a lot of FOMO. I don't know about you guys, but at least as myself, I really feel sometimes that, okay, that company is doing that and another company is doing whatever. I should be doing that is also in my company. And yes, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense for the timing being, for the situation you are in, whatever. So I hope that I explained to you in specific terms what we are doing and why, and let me know then in the end what are your questions, and I will try to answer it in the best of my capabilities. Okay, so let's start with this. So let's go to that very awkward moment where I try to share my screen. You are seeing my screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're not observing weird information, just the slides, right?
Yeah, it's not in presentation mode, but we are seeing the slides.
Okay, okay, very well. So let's start. So I already gave a bit of introduction, and so I started at Alts in January 2022. I was the first HR that was hired. So as you can imagine, my first year was a nightmare. It was wonderful and challenging and difficult at the same time. And I say it was a nightmare because you can imagine everything needed to be done. I have to say that the people that were taking care about this, so my COO and my CEO, were already doing like very nice things. They have very nice HR instincts, but anyway, like you kind of are trying to see what is important and what is not. And I think it was in the first semester that I went to the performance review process, and we already have some couple of questions that were established. We were doing it in, like for some people, we were doing it once a year. For some people, we were doing twice a year. For some people, there was no performance appraisal whatsoever. So it was very like a very chaotic system with nothing, like there was no monitoring of what was going on, no one really taking attention to if the performance review was actually being done and if it was actually giving results and so on. So it existed, but it was like this very proto situation. And it was all spread around in Notion. I remember there were pages everywhere. Like there was a database, but then there were pages spread around. And we were also 20. So I think like back then it was important, but not so important. So that's what I received in my hands. And I had a conversation with our COO about it. And a very important thing, we are remote, so the majority of us are in Portugal, but then we also have people like in Latin America and Europe, and so it's also important that the system also reflects this remote culture. So basically, when I discussed with our COO, with João, what we wanted was like a process that was consistent, that everyone was doing it, that it was human, that it was like a process that actually gave value to the company, not just like that check that we do every 6 months or once a year, just because we have to do decisions like salary raises or promotions or whatever. And we wanted the process to focus on growth. So considering that, we followed these four steps or four mantras, so to say. So the first one was, okay, so I talked with João about the process. Of course, he, as an executive, he has his own vision about it, but we also thought that it was important to understand what was the perception of people about the process. So back then, so we are talking about 2022, back then, I met with some key people in the company, including managers and also like normal employees, to understand what were their feelings about the frequency, the value that it was provided by the questions, if they had feedback about the questions themselves, what was being asked, what was the value that they were taking from it. And it was quite nice because basically I prepared like 3, 4 questions, and I set up like sort of a focus group of 3, 4 people, and I would send the questions beforehand. Of course, no one would read them, but then, but it was already, but the people that would read it already were prepared for the meeting to understand. And even what the ones that didn't read like in the, as we say in Portuguese, in the diagonal, right? So they did a bit of a scoop on the questions. So it was quite fruitful, I have to say. Something, and that's also important, and something that my previous manager taught me, that every time you ask feedback from people about the process, always manage their expectations in the beginning. So I always told them, look, I'm asking you these questions. That doesn't mean that we'll apply everything that you are saying. So we are trying to understand what is the overall opinion. We are then crossing over that opinion with the management opinion, and then we will deliver what we think is best for the company, considering the voices of all stakeholders. I have to say that in the situations that imagine that someone would tell you, I have a case actually of someone that wanted a really like grading system in the performance review because it would give her like more peace of mind to have like a grade for each question. And that was actually something that we don't have at all in our system. That I talked to her after that about like the focus group kind of part to explain her why we made that decision. Of course, I just did on the key situations with key people about when there was like a big gap between what was our vision and the vision that the employee gave about it. So that was quite cool. I liked it. Then the next step and the next like mantra that we have, it was that we wanted feedback, not feedback, we wanted questions and an evaluation that was more focused on how people do things instead of what people have done. So what I want to say is, like, results are important. So if you achieved your KPIs, if you achieved your I don't know, your goals in whatever metric of your team, but the how you achieved it, it's very, very important for us. We are from a very high demanding industry, very, very competitive, and sometimes results are just not good. And it's not because that you didn't do your best. Sometimes it's because like the world woke up like that. And we weight, of course, results, but we weight more the behaviors and how you have done it. And the only like the Bible for that is the values, and the values that the company defend. So we build questions based on those values. And we don't give like a punctuation per question or a final punctuation of people. So we don't say, okay, so between 1 and 5 punctuate this person or whatever. Then one that's also important for us is, instead of having everyone at the same time and stop all the operations with having a performance review in January and in, I don't know, July or June. Our performance appraisal is based on the employee life cycle, respecting the cycle of each person. So that means that, okay, I start in January, so my first performance appraisal will be in July, most likely. So, and then every 6 months after that. And like that, we are really more focusing on the rhythm of the employee and not on the rhythms of the company. And I think an operational value for us is that you don't have a manager that is in a given month evaluating like 10 people or 7 people, right? So like this, the manager can provide time for each person. And since our questions are writing, so you need to write and give examples of why you are giving that punctuation to the people, we really want the manager and the managee to take their time to think about things. One very, very important for us also is that the performance appraisal goal is to focus on growth and development, and it's not to make admin decisions. So we split, there's no relation whatsoever. I mean, not so whatsoever, not accurate sentence, but like after the performance review, nothing happens. So that means that you don't receive a raise or you don't receive a promotion after performance review. It might happen. And for instance, for salary reviews, we have twice a year moments where we check everyone's salaries. And of course, promotions also happen, and they can even happen at the same time as the performance review. But it's important for us that we don't associate these two moments. So then people can feel safe, both manager and managee can feel safe when they are giving feedback to each other, and not me feeling that I cannot give feedback because I'm afraid if I say something that might affect my salary increase or the way that my manager thinks about me, and vice versa as well. So managers can also think if I give a compliment to my employee, they will feel that maybe they should receive something, and I don't know. So for us, it's really important to, like, the main goal of the performance appraisal is growth and development, period, for us. Okay, let me drink a bit of water. All right, so based on these, the process, like the general feeling of the process in general, it is divided in 3 big phases. So the first part, manager replies to some questions about the performance of the employee, and managee replies to some questions about themselves and also about their interaction with the manager. So we have like these 2 parts for the performance process, the performance review process from the employee point of view. And they writing, like each one writing on their own, and then we establish a date and they share what each other wrote about each other. And like that, they prepare what we call the feedback exchange conversation. And on this call, basically, they explore what was written and they explore doubts, they explore highlights of what was written, both parties, if there was any unfairness. And also very important, they start to define next steps. So based on the information that was given, let's define goals for the next quarter, for the next semester. Okay. For instance, in my own case, in my own team, what I do, we basically discuss what are the main areas of improvement. And I actually ask my managees to think about like goals that they think they have to pursue on the next 3 months or 4 months or 6 months to achieve that, to improve those areas of improvement that we identified. And and then I'm sorry, I've lost my mind a bit. So and then they talk to me, they send me the goals, I review them, and then if there are any discrepancy or if I think okay, you should go that way or that way, I change it with the managee itself themselves. So and for me at least this is not very across the alts. I think different managers have different approaches to goal definition with managees. At least on my perspective, and that's something that then I discuss with managers as well. I think it's important that the managees also take ownership about their own improvement and that they define what also they think they need to do in order to achieve something. Because of that, it's easy also to talk about accountability instead. Okay, so my manager told me to do this and that, but I didn't agree or I didn't really understood what. And I think like that, we also give accountability and responsibility to the managee to understand what there are on areas of improvement and how to improve them. And my role here being more mentoring and helping on, okay, maybe not like these, maybe you could go that way instead of this way. All right. Okay. So about by the way, about this, the cycle basically starts. So imagine on the first weekday of November, the manager and the managee receives a notification in Lipsum saying, hey, your time of performance review has come. The manager establishes with the managee the call, so the feedback exchange call, and what is the moment they will share the feedback. And then after the call, they define goals and then they write those goals on Lipsum. So that's like the mechanics of the process overall. Okay. So I also have here some prints on Lipsum. So this is directly from our Lipsum, okay? So here you can see like the main structure. So so we have, this is actually one of the versions. I'm not going to explain you whatever more specifically, but so basically this is the structure of these. Okay, you're seeing my screen. So this part, the on your left, is what the managers have to reply. Also the key takeaways on your right. So this is the part of the managers. And then on your right, on the self-assessment part, you can see the self-assessment and then the manager interaction part. Okay. Do I have anything to say here? Yeah. So as you can see on your right side, you have that on the key takeaways, you have one question, which is, what is your overall assessment of this person? This question is only for me. I'm the only one that sees the answer of this question. And this is a multiple answer question. And here I have the person needs to put where they put the person on a scale, like if it's underperforming, performing, over exceeding expectations, or like top performer. And I use these to sometimes to help managers to improve their feedback, because sometimes you have people that are on top performance and the managers are like, very good performer, thank you, like very very laconic on the way that they say that employee is like top performer, or the opposite, like very like not very good employees, or on a very not very good employees, like in a very bad phase. And sometimes you need to give a note, hey, the way that you give feedback needs to be more clear on what you want to say. And yeah, and then as an example, so I told you that we create questions based on the value. So one of our values is I agency, and here you can see the questions that we have associated with the value I agency. Okay. All right. Do I have anything here that I want to say? No. Okay, so what do I felt? And I'm going to say what I felt and not what I measure. Very important note. Why I don't say what I measure? Because when I started, I didn't have anything like to measure. So it's a bit more complicated to go to the measure part. And I also have measure part for the second part of the performance improvement 2.0. But that's another story, not for our story today. But so I think I've been part of many process reviews since I started working. I have to say, I think the one at Alts is the one that is more engaged by everyone, and that I'd say 90% of the company really takes value from it. So they know it's heavy, but really they really see value in the process. And I see that on now engaging is everyone about the process, the importance everyone gives to this. So I have managers, or not managers, but I have people sometimes asking me, do I know more or less when it's going to be my performance review? So people anticipate this moment. Of course, they don't make a party, but it's not, I don't have people like, oh, I'm going to a performance appraisal process and now all over again. And also I think when people feel that I have sometimes some situations when the performance of the managee, like nothing really happened during when, like in 6 months, that justifies like a full process of performance appraisal. And sometimes, not very often, but sometimes managers come to me talking about it, and I say, okay, why do you think you don't have anything to say? And I try to explore. And sometimes for the business and for the people, really doesn't make sense to make twice a year on that year specifically performance appraisals. So I think, and that's something that our size allows, is that you can also give some flexibility of how the process it goes from everyone. So sometimes, so when someone is promoted in the middle of the semester, so imagine that employee X had their performance appraisal in January, and then in April, the person was promoted to something. So instead of making the second performance appraisal in July, we basically, because it doesn't make sense, because it didn't give enough time for us to understand the performance of that person in that new role, we basically count to 6 months after the promotion itself. But again, and I'm going already for the things that I think areas of improvement or things that we haven't solved yet. I think for 50 sized people company, I think you can give that level of flexibility, but I have my doubts about scalability after a while. But that's a conversation for later. But in general, I feel that overall, like, people see the appraisal as a moment of growth and reflection, and not just something that HR tells us to do because they have to do some decisions, or managers need to make some decisions. And it's very interesting. I have like coaching. I have conversations with managers about how to give feedback and so on. And it's really interesting on how they engage in this conversation with employees as well. And I think it also helps a lot on this culture of really of human focused kind of perspective that we have about this process. Okay, all right. So about things that I think we still have to tackle, or I don't have an answer for that, or it's going to be for the 2.0 version. I have 6 here, at least like the main 6 that I thought about. And the first one that I've put here was the difference of approach between managers. So you have managers that when giving feedback and when dealing with writing feedback and giving feedback on the conversation call, they are very different. I think, of course, every company feels this. I'm not like the first one feeling this pain. Pain, I don't think like being different is necessarily bad. Also important. I don't think that you don't follow like the process like very specifically as it was structured, it means it is bad. Sometimes it gives me ideas of improvement as well, like those exceptions to the rule. So I don't think it is bad in this way. So sometimes exceptions to the rule help you to understand where you need to improve, where are like the bottlenecks, efficiency, bureaucracy, whatever. But I also think that sometimes you have to tackle, you have this thing of managers giving different experiences and having different experiences with the process. And for me personally, it's a bit difficult to understand when it is an okay situation and when it is not okay situation. So maybe I'm being a bit too abstract, but for instance, a feedback like a manager that is a bit more laconic is not necessarily bad. It depends of how they give feedback to people and how they manage all the cycle of the employee. Um, and sometimes it can be bad. And I take a lot, like the majority of the time I take on the performance appraisal process actually is me reading the feedback. I give feedback specifically to managers about next time you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you should write like this. So I really take my time in helping managers to provide like better feedback based on what I extract from the performance reviews. And that's something that I see. I have different levels of maturity across managers. And the level of flexibility that we allow, it makes even the experience more different. It just like my main doubt is when does it stop, when it becomes bad, the flexibility. And that's actually related to the second part. So managers do their thing sometimes. What is very funny actually is like my CEO and COO really buy in the process as it is, but they also do their own thing. It's still within the structure, but they do their own thing. And I have that sometimes, like when I should be more more rigid and or am I enough rigid? Should I be more rigid? I have that personal doubt as well. Sorry, I'm trying to be very like honest about what I feel, right? Instead of I have a lot of answers about everything and I have everything thought about. Yeah, the third one is scalability, and this one for now it's not a big worry, but it is a worry because I don't know even the management of the process itself. I don't know like if even if we put more 20 people over the process, what it will happen. I cannot predict how these will grow with our growth, so to say. Because as you can see, there are a lot of like you need to write. There is this thing of, like the performance appraisal happens every 6 months. I don't know how the flexibility I told you about. I don't know when and how it will work when we are more people. Then salary reviews and promotions. So about the salary reviews, actually, we have already something established, which is we have specific times, as I said, for salary reviews. And then when we decide salary reviews, we take into consideration, of course, the performance appraisal, but that's not the only source of information that we use to inform our decisions about if someone gets a raise or not. And I like that because it also depends on the moments of the department. It depends also on the results of the department and how things are going in the department to decide to inform like these kind of decisions and not only the performance itself. Then promotions. The promotions are like, I have this thought that like you can be like the best performer in your function now, but if you get promoted, that doesn't mean that you'll be top performer on that new role. And I find it funny that we decide like that association between promotion and performance appraisal is so tied up. I understand why, but for me it's like different things. So you get promoted because we want to recognize your effort, but also because we want to give you this extra challenge, right? And we want to check if it works well. Sometimes it won't, sometimes you need help, but that doesn't mean that you are a bad performer per se. And about the promotions, we still have the process a bit spread around, and I think we need to give some love to the promotions process itself. Then goals accountability. What I mean with goals accountability is that we, in the end of the performance appraisal, we have some goals, and there are managers that are better than others to following up on understanding if those goals are being accomplished and if people are actually taking directions to improve. So sometimes imagine someone wants, we identified in the performance review that someone wants to be better in data analytics, so they want to do I don't know, an HR analytics course. And so I have some managers that don't follow up to understand if the person actually made efforts to make the course on HR analytics, right? So, and sometimes only in the next performance appraisal, this topic is discussed. And that's something that I need to work on the process with the managers as well. So there are managers that are more following up these than others. And then the sixth, so we use Lipsum, but it's still a bit manual, the process that I have to make to manage this employee life cycle kind of process. And I haven't found yet a process that can receive a software that can receive our process like a glove. But Lipson, attention, I don't have any relations with Lipson whatsoever. Okay, I'm not making any advertisement. But it was the one that we found the best suitable for the way that we structure our process and how people are involved and so on. And I think that's it from my side.
Thank you, Rita. We now have time for questions. So if you
Okay.
have questions, you can add them in the chat. We already have some questions people wrote during your presentation. So Cheryl is asking, really interesting process. Does everyone have to write their responses, or can you audio record it instead?
No, only writing. It's writing. It's writing. I have some, as you can imagine, I can already see some ChatGPT love going on. I don't find it bad. Actually, that's for me. When I see some ChatGPT, you can see like in some texts that there were improvements on the quality of the text itself from before and now, which for me is nice. And it helps. And I find that, so ChatGPT has one advantage, one disadvantage. One advantage, like it helps managers to find words for what they want to say, and sometimes a bit more specific words instead of like very, I don't know, lost way. But sometimes, and this is a disadvantage, some people use, and of course, the way that you use the tool, it says more about, it is more important than the actual tool. So some people became a bit even more fluffier So like, oh, I can see that your performance has increased and you are a very motivated person and so on. So the problems are still there, right? Even with ChatGPT. But it helps some of them as well.
Marina also asked, does this mean that performance reviews are done via Zoom, not in person?
Of course, we are remote. Needs to be in Google Meets in our case.
Just is, well, it's a comment, but I think you can make it a question. I wonder what skills managers need to have good conversations about employee growth, and on other hand, what skills employees need to have good conversations with their managers about their own career growth aspirations.
That's a good question. Is used or just or joust?
Joost.
Used, yeah, like
Joost.
you Dutchies, you and your pronunciation. I worked for a Dutch company for 4 years, and I still, I
Yeah,
still
difficult.
still have. And your surname is Haarhuis?
Aarhuis. Yes.
Haarhuis.
Yeah.
Okay, see, not bad.
Well done.
So skills. I think so. I think in general, the capacity of receiving and giving feedback, and of course, I'm being very vague, but what I mean with giving is you need to give concrete examples, avoiding like fluffy words like you are very self-motivated. What the hell does that mean? And I give these a lot, I give a lot of feedback based on that. So if I would say like the biggest trend of improvement is like transform like big words into examples. So I give a lot of feedback saying, okay, that's fine that you say someone is self-motivated, but then you need to give an example and explain why and not just say self-motivated.
Sounds like you could use the STAR model, right?
Yeah, the star model, that's a very good framework. Yeah. The star model, also explaining the impacts of star is R goes for results, but it's the impact that it has. Also, and sometimes, I have multicultural, and this is important, I didn't mention. I have a multicultural team, right? So I have Portuguese people giving feedback to Brazilians, Brazilians giving feedback to Slovenians, and it's very funny because I work with a Dutch company, so I know like Dutch people think Portuguese are very like fluff and vague when giving feedback, and we think Dutchies are very direct. So imagine Brazilians think that Portuguese are direct, and sometimes the way we write feedback because it helps to prepare and structure conversations, and and the preparation is quite important exactly to avoid like weird sentences going on in meetings, right? Because then the manager needs to think about it, needs to explain why she or he thinks like that instead of saying random sentences in meetings. And 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 sometimes the way people read into what is going on is different. So I think cultural difference awareness is very important, both sides. Because like for one side, the Portuguese needs to understand that the Brazilian thinks that we are direct, and the Brazilian needs to know that Portuguese are more direct than Brazilians, right? So cultural awareness for us is quite important. Then so specific examples, associating big words with facts, avoiding words that can mean bad stuff. So sometimes you can have a manager that says, okay, you don't communicate well, like no one in the world is going to receive this in a good way, right? So people will be defensive. If someone talks to me and says I'm not a very good communicator, I would say, huh? Explain me why. because people, so like communication is a word that is used for everything, right? So the company does not communicate well, the employee does not communicate well, but communication means always a lot of different things, different depending on people.
So it's about giving and receiving feedback and
Yes.
handling communication. So communication skills are important there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you. See, you're being Dutch. You're directing my answer. Like it. Thank you. Thank you. But that's it. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Then we have a question from Raquel. She's asking, are the questions always the same in the performance assessment or performance templates, or do they change throughout the year? What are the main challenges of the performance appraisals in a remote context?
Okay, first question. We have a different questions for your first performance appraisal. So the first is different from the others. And then the others are always the same.
Can you explain why?
Because so the first is more structured. It's more structured for both parts. So, or at least is mandatorily more structured. So then the employee, since it's the first time the employee is going to receive feedback, we want to force a bit that people give a more structured feedback instead of a bit more fluffy or whatever. So it's important for them for me, it's like a key moment because the person still doesn't have or might not have psychological safety enough to ask, okay, so why are you saying this? And can you please tell me a bit more about this part or about that part? And like this, everyone knows what is on the table when we are assessing someone. So that's the first question. Then the second, remote setting. Okay, remote. Let me think. You know, I think it's hard for me to answer that question because like in my previous company, we have like a grading system. And I think it's more difficult to work with that system is like in terms of getting inputs from other people than in our system. Because one of the things that remote can do is that it's a bit more impersonal and a bit more difficult and feel trust to ask. But I don't think we have that problem. What do I find challenging in remote? I think maybe like if it's a very good one, there are more for sure, but I'm just remembering this one. If it's a very good appraisal or a very bad appraisal, emotionally, I think it's more complicated to handle the situation. But I think this about remote as a whole. So peaks of emotion in remote are more difficult to handle. So why I say this? So when you are very happy and something very good happens in your work life, it's nice that you leave the room, you go to your friends in your workplace, okay, let's have a beer and let's go party a bit. Like I just got promoted or I just had received this amazing feedback from my manager and I'm very happy. I pay you a round of beers, you know? And when it's a very bad, when you have a negative peak, you also don't have peers to help you out to overcome that moment in an easier way. So it's sometimes you have a very bad meeting with you can have a bad meeting or a bad moment, and it's always nice that you leave the room same way and you grab your friend and say, look, I need to share a word with you, can I? And when you are remote, it's a bit more difficult to do this because you need to be very proactive about it. You don't have your friend that will notice that you are not good. And in your workplace, you can see that your friend is not in a good way, or he or she is very, very happy.
All right, then we have a very long message from Alina. I will read everything. So thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting to learn how the process is implemented in your company. Could you please tell me, when working with employees from different countries, have you encountered any challenges in giving or receiving feedback? If so, how did you manage them? For example, employees from the US tend to give and receive feedback a bit more openly than those from Norway.
Oh, didn't know about that, about the Norway. Yeah, I think I thank you for the compliment. I think I already gave partially answer to that question. I had very nice and interesting conversations with managers about it, because I think the main doubt that they usually have, and I have as well, is that what kind of effort should I put to adapt, and until when or until where, So because imagine that you have a culture that is a bit more vague or indirect, or a bit more humble when saying something a bit more negative or saying something a bit more assertive. If that person is working in a company that the culture of the company is like really being very straight, and very like straightforward to things, when it is a performance issue and when it is a cultural situation that we need to adapt. And I have this philosophical question on my head many, many times. And I think that's always also a conversation that I have with managers sometimes, and navigate that philosophical question, it's tough sometimes. And I think we live in a period of time that we try to put black or white, but this question is very far from black or white. And for me, anyone that says the opposite, I'm very sorry, but it's bullshitting me, because it's a very gray situation. I'm of course saying I'm in extreme situations, but then you can go for very gray situations.
All right. I think that's all for questions. Thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you, Rita, for
Thank
sharing your
you.
knowledge, expertise,
Thank
and
you.
what you are doing in your company.
Thank
The
you.
recording will be made available after the session. And I think that's all. Thank you,
Okay.
guys, and
Thank
have a good
you.
weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye bye.